All right, so we'll get this meeting started. Everybody is sitting down, ready to go. Thank you so much, everyone. It is just so good to see this room almost full. And maybe as people drift in, it will be full. I think we have about 70 registrants, and that is really an excellent showing for us. If I could ask everybody, please turn off your phones. If they want to shiver and shake, I suppose, on the table, it won't hurt. But other than that, we really don't want to have people being interrupted by beeps and noises from your phones. Go ahead. All right, and I'm also too, just so anybody that doesn't know, if you're looking for the washroom, it's out right through the lobby to the end of the lobby and just down a short way down the hall. So if you're at any point needing to use the washroom, just proceed that way, and you'll be fine. We're going to start by having a motion to accept the agenda. Now, I'm doing this on behalf of Monica. Monica's our secretary. She's making a motion to accept the agenda as it's written. If there's any questions about the agenda, raise them now. Therefore, Monica moves to accept the agenda. May we have a seconder? And if you, okay, so Linda Derosier will second. Anybody opposed? We'll unanimously accept the agenda. I have my Chief Financial Officer who's going to review the financial statements. Do you want to come and present the financial statement, please, Linda? Yes. Linda Derosier, she's our existing CFO and Treasurer.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to see y'all here. And so I've been interim CFO for about 8 months. And I kind of took over that position so that Vicky would be able to run for leadership because she was previously the CFO before that. So our total annual revenue for last year was $14,065, and our expenses were $10,618. Our actual bank account as of today, we have about $8,607 in our account, and we're still waiting for some money to be deposited. So, we had our audit done last month and was all sent to Elections Alberta. It was all approved, so it's all good.
All right. Are there any questions about the financial statements, please?
And if anybody wants a copy of the financial statement, I have cards over here with my name. You can just email me and I'd be happy to send it out to you. All right?
Make a motion to accept it.
Oh, can you? So I'm putting forward a motion to accept the financial statement as it is.
Dana, will you second that, please? That's okay.
Oh, I'll second it.
All right, so Vicky will second that.
Perfect.
Any objections? Financial statements are hereby accepted.
Thank you.
Okay, before we move forward, I do want to draw your attention to our guest speakers' books at the end of the table. 2 exceptionally fine books. This was kind of my Bible years ago when I first got really involved in the separatist movement, and Michael Wagner wrote a great, history on the separatist movement in Alberta called Separatism Then and Now. Michael's selling his books, and this one is very recent, and it's an absolutely perfect title. No Other Option, Self-Determination for Alberta. Please do, if you have an extra $15 in your pocket, support Michael and buy his book and read it. All right, so essentially we are here as the Independence Party. We all know that right now in Alberta, we have a lot of people very, very interested in the independence movement. But our movement is fractured and divided, and it seems to be coming from all sorts of ends and from all sorts of directions. And I think it is certainly Vicky and I, a very big motivation of Vicky and I, that we somehow act as the Independence Party to bring these forces together. We have the sole and unique principle of a referendum on independence. We our party is not clinging to a bunch of policies that are developing and changing, whatever, but we absolutely cling to the idea that we want to present a choice for Albertans in the coming election in 2023. If we do not stick together and give Albertans a choice, which means that if they elect us, they will be actually voting to have a referendum on independence in that first year after the election. And that's the option we want to give them that no other party gives them. We are open and prepared, and if some of you I know are from other movements, or you're certainly interested, you've heard a lot about it, talk to your people and talk to them and say the Independence Party is not wedded to anything other than the fact that they're going to offer independence. We must come together under this banner because it is the single banner here in Alberta that offers that option. And so that's why I'm so glad to see that our party is growing. We've doubled our members in the last while. We really are moving forward, and with your help, with everybody's help here, we can move forward. We're not wedded to some idea that we want to just shut everybody out and keep this divisiveness going. We don't. We want to bring people together. We want to move into the 2023 election as a coherent and cohesive independence movement. So I have had the pleasure in the last 8 months, 10 months, to work with Vicky Bayford. Vicky, I saw her sort of going along on social media, and I saw her getting involved in the movement. Had never heard of her. I've been in the separatist movement since 2003, so I'd never heard of her before, but I recognized an energetic, intelligent woman, willing to put everything forward to move this message of independence forward. We developed a bond and a friendship even before we ever physically met, online and in our talks back and forth. And Vicky was working very hard. She was struggling against a lot of uphill climbs and some resistance and various things. You know the sort of things that happen in politics, right? And so she asked me, she said, Sharon, would you get involved? Would you come on board and help us out? So I joined in August of last year, first of all, as the communications director at large, and then I applied to take over the position of president. Vicky has been a very excellent person to work with. She and I lock heads sometime. That's good in politics. You've got to have discussions and debates. But we work through them. We always come out at the other end, together, unified, to do the right thing for our party. We'll continue to do that, and our new board will continue to do that. It has been a pure pleasure to work with Vicky over this last 10 months, and I'd like you to help me join with me to welcome Vicky Bayford, our leader, to the party.
Yeah, those of you, I actually have a lot of familiar faces in this room, which makes this so much easier. There's every one of you, I just want to thank you for being here, for making the effort to come down and to listen to what we have to say, to come meet our new board and just share with us the vision on what we're trying to accomplish in 2023. I actually want to just let you know a little bit about myself. So I was actually born in Fort McMurray, but I was actually raised in Calgary. We moved to Calgary when I was about 2, and I grew up in the Bowness area of Calgary. I loved it because it was kind of like living outside the city, inside of the city, and it was just a lovely area to grow up in. I raised both my boys there. I have a almost 31-year-old boy and another son who's 23, who are successfully living on their own, and which is really great. It was quite the I think as any parent in this room would imagine. I mean, parenthood is not easy, and trying to get your kids through a society where there's so much cancel culture and a lot of the propaganda that's going on right in our school system, how hard that's been fight those battles and keep my kids on a path of being self-accountable and like being accountable for their actions and being able to, step forward as independent men in this world. So I wanted to talk a bit about the last few years and everything that's gone on. I originally started, I guess, taking a political interest in 2015 when Trudeau was first elected, like a lot of us. I did see a big rising in the Wexit movement, and I took a bit of interest in it, but I didn't really get involved at that time. I've worked in oil and gas for pretty much my whole adult career. I do regulatory, and obviously it was affecting me personally because it was affecting my industry, the industry that I grew up in, the industry that allowed me to provide for my children, and the industry that made Calgary thrive. I watched Calgary turn into a ghost town. I watched it start to dwindle. It's still sitting there, as much as they want to say that there's this big recovery. You can, maybe we got a little bit more morning traffic again since the restrictions have been lifted, but really, the industry is not what it was. And it was really disappointing. So I guess, after the bills started coming out, Bill C-69 and the tanker ban, C-48, I really started getting involved, I guess, on an activist side. I started going to rallies, trying to fight for our pipelines, writing to my MLAs, writing to my MPs, writing to every government institution I could think to write to. And it felt, obviously at times like it was useless, and I was trying to think, like, what can I actually do? What is going to actually change the motion? Because these things are happening at a federal level, and it seemed like, when you talk to your MLAs, they can't do anything about it. You talk to your MPs, they're like, well, we don't really have a voice, and they will tell you that. They're like, we're fighting for you though, and I'm like, nothing was happening. And I kind of had left it, I still just kept living my life like everybody else did, I said, continually trying to communicate and find solutions, but I really didn't know, and I really didn't understand politics, and I didn't understand the processes involved. Then COVID hit, and we were shut down. And at first, I think, like a lot of people in this room, for the first 2 weeks, you're going, why would they shut down the whole world for nothing? Why would they? That doesn't make sense. So obviously the first 3 weeks, I sat there being like, people are dying everywhere. I'm watching the news like everybody else, trying to keep up on what's happening. I was scared, like many people. And then I went to go visit my brother one morning, and I slipped on the ice and I broke my wrist. I went to the hospital and it was empty. I was like, what? So at this time, the nurses and doctors weren't being quieted. They didn't know what was going on either, as much as I did. So I was like, is there a private entrance for the COVID people? Where's the people in there? Where's the body bags? What's going on? And they were like, nope, it's been dead, it's been quiet. And they didn't have any explanation. So I think at that point, I really started looking into what was actually happening. I actually met up with some groups that were quite aware very, very quickly in this. And I started going to these marches in Calgary on Elbow Drive, and there was literally 20 people. We stood out there and we held signs. There was other groups that we got involved in that had been rallying against government for years and years and years, and they had probably a group of 25. And eventually we got those two groups together and we were marching at 50 people strong. It was amazing. And people were like, why are you doing that? I was posting stuff on social media that people didn't agree with. I was trying to use my voice as best as I could. And people couldn't understand why I would go out there every single Saturday with a sign saying, you're overreacting. People aren't gonna fall. The government's not really gonna do this. Like, people were telling me at that time. I wasn't even really fully aware. people were telling me, this is leading to something more. This is going to be mandatory vaccines, this is gonna be this. And even in the back of my mind, I was still like, there's no way the Albertans will fall for this. There's no way. I was wrong. You know, in a very big way. I mean, many of us in this room became aware at very different stages throughout this last 2 years. But I couldn't believe how quickly things changed. So, yeah, after about 2 or 3 months of rallying again, I was still stuck. I'm like, I enjoyed going to the rallies, I enjoyed being around these people, I enjoyed learning about what I was learning. But it still wasn't enough because it wasn't a solution. And I'm like, what can I really do to change this? I need to change this because this is not going well for society. So then I joined the Independence Party. I went to a board meeting in July of 2020, and basically just sat in on my first political meeting. Actually, Mike was there. Mike Dennis, that was the first time I met Mike. And it was interesting. There was a lot of fighting and a lot of different things I wasn't expecting. But at the same time, I thought, okay, well, you know, if this is what politics is, then I'll do what I can to get involved. So I thought it was going to be door knocking and handing out brochures. Within 3 months, the CFO at that time had decided he wanted to step down. I know how to do bookkeeping, so I said, well, you know, I'll help you with that then. So I ended up being the CFO for the party. And then shortly after that, I think within a month or two, I ended up being the communications director. And then that's when Sharon probably started seeing all the social media. So I actually ended up with a really great team for a short period of time where we were getting things out, getting the message out. The party was starting to grow. And like a lot of times inside of these political parties, we started getting the infighting. And I'm not going to go into all the garbage because that is what it is. You end up with this infighting, and you get some personalities involved, and sometimes you just have to dig in and be stubborn it out and flatten things out. So, and get things working again. But it did kind of cause, you know, a little bit of decline in our party again. But I wasn't ready to give up. They called the leadership race right after AGM last year. And there was another fellow that was going to run, named Peter Downing, and he was the only one that was going to run. And I had about 12 people call me and say, well, are you going to run? And I was like, no. And they said, well, if you let this particular person, Peter, run, he will destroy your party. So I thought long and hard, and I literally actually got to the place where I said, okay, God, if you want me to do this, then one more person has to ask me. And the next day I got a phone call and one more person asked me, so I said, okay, I'm gonna do this. Turns out he backed out of the race shortly after he found out that I had more support than I guess he probably thought I would have. And from particular people, like maybe Sharon. and he dropped out, so I ended up being an acclaimed leader. So obviously, like starting out, leader of a party, never being involved in politics, and really not even knowing what I was supposed to be doing. I was, you know, starting off I felt some pretty shaky ground. And I definitely could not have gotten through these last 8 months without Sharon. I mean, Sharon has taught me so much. She has, like I said, we have our battles, but it's great because we have those, we are the yin and the yang. We are such different personalities in some ways, but we have the same goal. And we push each other in different ways that we can come to a place where we can get the best decision made for the party. There was lots of things that, you know, I wish I had known 20 years ago. There's lots of things I wish I had understood in the political realm, because we do have power We do have an actual democracy. We just have never been taught to use it. I didn't even know what a constituency association was before I joined a party. I didn't understand that there was someone in my community that I could have gone to outside of the MLA and talked to and said, these are my concerns in my community and this is your job to express these things. And that's where the real power is. That's where democracy lives, is in the people. And we just thought our job was to show up and vote every 4 years. That's not our job. Our job is to be involved in our community and involved in at the very least, expressing your concerns with your constituency association and having those filtered up to your MLA, who filters that up into legislature. And that is a grassroots movement. I think one of the most important things we're going to have to do over this next year is not just sell people on independence or let them know that this is the path forward for an actual prosperous Alberta, but we are going to have to teach people about democracy. Not just what it is, and if you get 51%, you win. That's not what democracy is. Democracy is using your voice in every chance you get and sticking up for the little guy and saying screw it to cancel culture. We cannot be quiet anymore. We have to use our voices. As once said by an Australian Indigenous artist, Lilla Watson, if you've come here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come here because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. We are here, unified today, striving towards one common goal, independence. We are at a crossroad, and we know that there is only one path that will see Alberta through to a prosperous future. There is no hero that is going to step up and save us from the evil that is on our doorstep. And now we must take responsibility for our own lives and be the change we want to see. We must stand up unashamed and without a shadow of a doubt, spread our message of independence to our fellow Albertans. We must let our own fears of uncertainty not hold us back. We know with certainty where our current path in this road will take us. It is now time to forge a new road, one that has never been taken, one that will lead ourselves, our friends, and our families to a brighter and prosperous future. Previous movements have failed because of the same old, because the same old didn't seem that bad. And when push came to shove, the independence movement would muddy their message with words like autonomy, with no clear sight or no real solution. Many of those within the earlier movements were considered a fringe minority. Sound familiar? And those who held strong independence views were dismissed very quickly in the political and non-political realm. We will not tolerate being labeled a fringe minority. We will speak louder than the groups that wish to dismiss us, and we will not allow our voices to be silenced. In the past, the voice and confidence of a real movement had not been born. And as we move forward, we will not allow the bending of this message any longer. History shows that in times of prosperity, such as boom times, Albertans quickly quell the call for independence and become complacent in accepting of our current government. No more. Now is the time to act. Now is the time to march forward towards change. Everything we need now to make independence a reality is now in front of us. The quiet rumble of discontent has now become a roar from every side of the political spectrum. Now the vast majority of Albertans can blatantly see the deception from the government and its agencies at every level. Every independence movement that has been successful was pushed by a repressive government. We could have never manufactured this situation or this moment in time, so we must grab this opportunity to better our lives and the lives of all Albertans. We must deliver a strong and true message and give citizens a reason to trust in the democratic system. It is time to give the power back to the people and give them control over their government, health, education, and above all else, their own destiny. We have the support within the province, and it is growing rapidly. We have the support throughout all of Canada and around the world. I get emails daily of people wanting to come here. If we're going to be free, they're going to join us. Over the next year, we're going to focus on finding those leaders within our province, building communities, and growing a strong independent party formed by the grassroots will of Albertans. We will finish what the convoy started. Our members will be the building blocks of our success. We will help build policies and create a constitution we will be proud to defend and live by. We will show Albertans that they have a voice and it matters, and in that destroy the apathy that has killed democracy and allowed corruption to reign in our current political system. By May of 2023, people will no longer fear the vote-splitting myth, because they will understand that there is only one path to a strong Alberta future, and that's independence. So you're gonna ask, what can you do? Well, showing up was a great first step, and anyone who gets to watch this afterwards, you need to get involved. There's many big voices in this room. I see them all over the place in this room, but we have to continue to use that voice every single day with every single person, even if they are on the other side of this. We plant seeds, that's what we do. There's many people that I have dealt with, including my own family, where at the beginning they completely doubted me. They thought I was going crazy. And slowly now they're starting to see. We just have to take people from where they're at and lead them the rest of the way. We cannot expect people that have been living in fear for 2 years to just all of a sudden understand that their fears were unjustified, because they were justified in their mind. So we have to have compassion, and we have to accept people for all their values and for what they can contribute. I don't really care what part of the political spectrum you fell on before. I don't care what part of the political spectrum you fall on now, because there was an importance to every party that was ever created. The NDP was created because labor laws, the government wasn't working for the worker. And there was a good cause when that party got started. The Liberals started because there were social injustices going around. And obviously the Conservatives, because we needed some type of fiscal responsibility. And those are just different views. Why can't we bring all those views together and come up with a place and a consensus that we can all live under a strong constitution? My biggest goal, I guess, in this party will be to bring all Albertans together. That is the most important thing that we can do, because it's the only way we're going to save our province and our nation. The Independence Party is the only party that will give Albertans a choice. We will not sway from that promise, and when we come out with a successful referendum, we will not let up until independence is achieved. Thank you guys so much for coming out, and I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much, Vicky. That was a very inspiring message for me. And I really do. She said something that is so important. This is the first time that we will ever have anything like this happen. This is the first time that Alberta, in 65 years of being exploited, of being taken for granted, of being overlooked, of being outvoted on every turn,
where we will have an opportunity in the next election to say we're going to vote for all of these fine candidates that you people are going to bring to us to help us to get elected. All of those fine candidates, we're going to put our check mark beside their name because they're going to give us a chance, the first time we've ever had it, to say to the entire country, to the rest of Canada, we're done and we're moving on. Thank you. I'm just going to have a shout out to our existing board right now. We've had some fluctuations over the year, but I want to thank the present people on the board. Vicky, of course, as our leader. Myself, as worked as president. Donna, Oster, Poetch is here. Linda, thank you so much for all the hard work you do with our treasurer and financial statements. We had Brad Giroux. Brad, unfortunately, he is just a wonderful leader, and he wasn't able to be here. It was a family matter that kept him away. Brad's way up in Athabasca. And Dale Ricard, who is also our policy director and worked with us that way. Val Gertson, she was throughout sort of some of the upheaval, and she stayed with us. And who am I missing, Vicky? Oh yes, of course, Monica. Where are you? There she is, yeah. Yes, Monica. Well, I keep saying, run this off, Monica. Write this up, Monica. Take these notes, Monica. And she keeps saying, yes, yes, yes. So thank you so much, Monica. And I would like to make a mention of a couple of people. Patrick Reilly was on our board for a while, and he's worked hard. There's people that started out in the beginning, and they struggled with the Independence Party. Like all of them, there's personalities, and there's people that unfortunately don't get involved and don't want to do something because they believe in the principle, because they believe that taking that principle forward is the main and only goal. They have personal agendas, and they come into political parties, and they cause upheaval. But so it was very important in the beginning for the Independence Party to be able to stay together. And Patrick was one of the people. He struggled very hard in the beginning to try to fix things up that were going sideways and everything else, and I do appreciate that. But you know what we failed to do, and I don't want to make that mistake today, because he and I were at terrible odds when this party started. Nevertheless, I want to give him a shout out of congratulations. The person who started this party, who founded this party, was a man called Dave Bjorkman. And I want us to give him a round of applause right now. Now, Dave made a lot of mistakes, but Dave didn't make one mistake. He was determined. And he decided, and he's done something that was never done before in the history of Alberta. He started a party by getting enough candidates, 63 candidates, on the ballot. He went from pub to pub, wherever he had to go, rodeo to rodeo, and he got people to sign up and to get on the ballot so that in the last election, we were able to form this party. So whatever our differences, there was, certainly some bumps and grinds and hills that happened with that. Nevertheless, Dave started this party, and so he will always be the founder of it, one way or the other. So I really do want to mention that today. So what we're going to do is we're going to introduce each of the members of our new board. None of the members of our new board were challenged for their position, so they were all acclaimed to the board. You will see, as we go through it, that there are gaps in our board that we really do need to fill, particularly on the executive, members that will actually carry forward certain portfolios and make sure that they work. So again, any of you out there who think that they can contribute and know that they can contribute to the growth of this party over the next year, we are going into an election with this board. This is the board that's going to take us into that election. So it's an important board, and if you know that you can help in any of these capacities, whether it's as a director at large or an executive member, please step forward. If you know anyone else that can, please bring them forward, because it's very important that we have a functional and working board, people that are actually willing to get their feet wet and their hands dirty and get in and really work hard. So we're going to start. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on myself, and so I'm going in again as the president. My name is Sharon McLeese. I've been a separatist since 2003. That's a long time. For a lot of you, you're thinking, were there actually separatists in 2003? There were indeed. I ran for the president of the Separation Party of Alberta. There were always struggles within the movement. We never really knew what was motivating people, but there would be people that wanted to stop things from moving forward. And that's certainly what happened with SPA. I met a gentleman called Alan Clark. I don't know if any of you remember him. Alan was a real cheerleader for Alberta. He was an independence-minded man who really, we went all over Saskatchewan. He and I spoke. We spoke all over Alberta. We really tried to push this forward. Alan died, unfortunately, a few years back, but he was really integral to that separatist movement. And so in 2003, I was a high school teacher after I graduated from the University of Saskatchewan. I did that for 7 years, and then moved on into my career as a real estate broker. I bought a Remax franchise when people didn't even know what the name was, and I worked with that for a while. Then I took out my license as a commercial industrial realtor, and I started my own company, McLeish Realty, and I brokered and bought and sold commercial real estate. Throughout it all, I was an investor. I believed in Alberta. I knew it was an up-and-coming province that could make me prosperous, and it was. It made me prosperous. It made lots of people, lots of you in this room, I know, and a lot of people across this province, people who came here from all over the country and became prosperous and live a good life and raise their family here. My interest in politics started really young. In grade 11, I wrote a speech called, "Do You Call This Freedom?" Nobody wrote speeches like that in grade 11. They usually took the encyclopedia and copied a treatise on Otto von Bismarck or something. And I did, even then, and it was quite the thing. I was arguing that Saskatchewan was not a free place. It was a socialist place, and it had to be a free democracy. And what did I know about it? But it started back then. And I've been really very political all my life. I got involved with the Reform Party in 1989, with them for a while, and then got involved in the separatist movement in 2003. And I have just kept always trying to take one step forward. There's been lots of roadblocks, but I won't stop. I will not stop until Alberta is an independent country, or I'm 6 feet under. Thank you. So I'd like to introduce our VP of Membership to introduce himself. Bob Leon. Please welcome Bob.
Thank you, Sharon. Well, thank you for coming, everybody. This is amazing. This is what I was hoping to see, and it's really inspiring. My name is Bob Leon. I'm from Peace River, Alberta, Northern Alberta. I've been pushing back now for 2 years, and in the last 2 years, I've met many amazing people, many amazing leaders, and a lot of them are in this room today. And I consider you all to be leaders today just by being here, and we need more, obviously. And so as Sharon was saying, our job is to go out and inspire more Albertans to get behind this movement and to bring back opportunity in this province. And so that's what I've been doing. It has been my role. It's just connecting with people all across the province and connecting people together. So I hope to continue doing that as VP of Membership and getting more people signed up to this party and getting us to the finish line in 2023, winning that election and winning back the rights and freedoms of all Albertans. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Bob, and welcome to our board. I look very much forward to working with you. So the next person I'd like to call to the microphone to introduce herself is our Director of Policy, Catherine Kowalczyk.
Thank you, Sharon, and I apologize that I'm late. We stopped actually in Three Hills and met somebody who's approached me a little while ago and is a UCP member and was curious about whether or not I'd be interested. And and helping that party. And we ran into him at the Pizza Hut. And so I said, no, it's nice to see you, but we're heading to the Independence Party AGM in Red Deer. He's like, oh, wow, we can't, and I'm just gonna, I'm a separatist at heart, but I'm just gonna stay here and do nothing. And I said, well, all you have to go is to the polling station next year and, check a box. That's all you really have to do, ultimately. Of course, we want more people involved. And I've been speaking for a couple of months now. My name is Kowalczyk, and I'm a founding member of Lawyers for Truth. And so we've been pushing back with respect to all of these. We've been pushing back right from the very beginning with respect to the lockdown and COVID measures. And for myself, I've been involved at various levels in my life in politics, very, very grassroots. It started, my first ever foray into politics was in my undergrad degree at the University of Manitoba, where I was on the Arts Student Body Council and then became the president of the University of Manitoba Students' Union. I was 21, I had an expense account, and that was a whole hell of a lot of fun. So from there, I was a legislative assistant for Reg Alcock, who was a Liberal MP at that time in the riding of Winnipeg, where the University of Manitoba was. And I worked in Centre Block for a year, and I deferred my law degree for 1 year to do that, then went to law school in Edmonton, and then moved down to Calgary, and I've been in Calgary ever since, and I've been practicing law in Alberta ever since 2003. And recently, my husband and I just moved from Calgary, Alberta to Standard, Alberta. We did our last walkthrough yesterday with our old home in Calgary, and we're very excited to call rural Alberta our home now, because we've had quite enough of Calgary, to be quite honest. Not to say that Calgary isn't a great city. I love Calgary for many years, and of course grew up there, and I'll be 47 in a couple of months, and I've seen throughout my life in Alberta a constant decline with respect to Albertans just basic self-respect for themselves. And I've really noticed that as well the last 2 years in particular. We are a very proud group of people. However, we've been, for whatever reason, we bought into this notion, many people have bought into this notion that we don't have the power, and that our governments bestow these rules upon us that we are expected to live by. And I don't know what kind of, I heard somebody say, what was the gene, the rebel gene. I guess I have the rebel gene, and I think probably everybody here has the rebel gene, right? Whatever that is, and I don't know what it is, but I like it. So at any event, I'm really happy to be here today. I'm really happy to be part of this board. I haven't really been in politics at all, other than my, university days, but I'm really excited to be part of this movement. Really good, salt of the earth people that I've met and continue to meet in this journey. And I know that when we just come together and have the mutual respect for one another, and we all want the same thing, which is really to be left alone, to raise our family the way we want to raise our family. We will succeed. And I'm really looking forward to working with all of you.
Thank you, Catherine, and we're really looking forward to having you on our board and giving us all of the legal stuff for in case we get lost on our way. The next person I'd like to introduce is our new Cfo Treasurer, Brandy Beveridge. Hi, Brandy. Come and introduce us. Tell us what you're going to do to move this party forward.
Hi there.
First of all, yes, that really is my legal name. I kept my married name, it was just easier. I like to have the same name as my child. And my maiden name was a little bit trickier for me to say, so I've stuck with it. It's been a conversation piece, and it will carry me forward into speaking to a crowd of people. Not my forte. Numbers, yes. Speaking, no. Microphones, definitely not. Carrie will vouch for me there. My first look at our financial statements for today, hearing about them. Woo, simple, easy, I got this. One thing I'm wondering about is where is our fundraising coordinator? I think that's maybe a role we're looking to fill. Wrote my speech out quickly yesterday. Speeches are never quick for me. I write and I write and I write. So I condensed and I condensed some more. And it turns out I didn't even have to write it because everybody here at the table has already taken a lot of my ideas. I'll throw a few things out there that are common theme. First of all, I live in Bowness, so maybe there's a correlation there. Secondly, I'm a bit of a rebel. All my life I've been there standing up for bullies, not taking it myself, fighting against deceit, fighting against power tripping, fighting against freedom stripping in my own little quiet, meek way. However I can, I step in. I'm a firm believer that what we can be, we should be, and at this point in time, I'm pretty worked up about what's going on in the world. I'm pretty worked up about how our freedoms have been affected. My family's freedoms have been affected. My friends' freedoms have been affected. And if the whole world would wise up and start paying attention, all of our freedoms are being affected. So I'm here in the background, working with numbers, crunching numbers, happy to be here, excited about going forward. I'll leave you with one quote that I'd listened to on the way to our meeting here today. It's from Abraham Maslow. He's the founder of positive psychology. And he said, it jumped out at me because I thought, wait a minute, it doesn't necessarily work right now. He says to step forward in growth, he says to improve your life, you either need to step forward in growth or to step back to safety. And which direction are you going to go? And I thought to myself, well, there really is no stepping back. There really is no safety net right now for us if we continue on the path that we're going down. So, stepping forward. I hope you'll all take that step with us.
Thank you very much, Brandy, and I think I forgot to tell Brandy that until we can find a fundraising director, she's got the job. But she's right, that is very pivotal, and I know people are intimidated by the whole thing of fundraising, but it's a real team job. It's just somebody that needs to spearhead it, and all of us have to get into the action and think of ideas and create means to fundraise, because without money we can't go anywhere, and so all of us can contribute to that. So I'm going to invite our past and future secretary, Monica Fries, to introduce herself and tell us what she's going to do to keep moving this party forward. Monica Fries. I know it's a long path.
That chick coming through. Hello, everybody. I'm going to keep the board. I'm going to keep them in line. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I'll crack the whip when it needs to be. I would just like to, first of all, yes, my name's Monica Fries. I would like to have a special mention here. Who is familiar with the Western Canada Concept Party?
Yeah.
We have one of the founding members here, and his name is Mike Benison. Mike, throw your hand up. Just let everybody know. After the AGM, I would say, just go over and talk to Mike, and he's got a wealth of information, and He's a great guy to talk to. Anyway, I've been a separatist since Jean Chrétien was in the PMO, very much like Sharon. His empty promise to scrap the GST solidified my decision that all politicians are self-serving and completely full of road apples. Now, I'm from the farm, so you can take the girl off the farm, right? Can't take the farm out of the girl. Anyway, so since then I've been searching for a political party that held the same values as I did. And one cold day in February in 2019, I was working on some cabinetry, because that's what I do. I'm a cabinet maker. I'm a contractor. I heard an interview with a man named Patrick on the Daniel Smith show. Patrick was able to answer some very, very tough questions about Alberta's separation and the Independence Party. I was impressed to the point where I needed to know more. So hence going to their website, found out some more information, did some research, and a few phone calls later, I was signed up as a candidate 2 days later. So going through the 2019 election, it was a very, very eye-opening experience for me. I realized that corruption and BS is very alive and well in politicians. I'm not a politician because I can't stand here and lie to you. So I'm not a politician, for sure. So after the election, I thought everybody would kind of scatter to the wind and go their own ways, but it wasn't to be because, as mentioned, Dave Bjorkman, the original founder of the party, he managed to pull a board together, and I was nominated to serve as the membership director. So I've also been the fundraising director, and I have served as both membership director and secretary at the same time. And so I just kind of decided that it was time for somebody else to take over. So Bob, you're the man. Thanks for stepping in. So yeah, I will be the secretary for the next year. So some of you might think that you don't have what it takes to serve on a constituency board or run as a candidate. But you simply won't know until you've tried. And what you have to do is reach down inside and try. I did. I put my best foot forward, and I think it gave me the right to say I tried. And I'm going to be trying again in 2023. So my challenge to all members and non-members is to get involved in some way. And together, hopefully, we can all make a difference in 2023. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica. And you know, that is so important. I mean, you think back, and so Dave got the thing started, and people like Monica, they just kept on putting one foot in front of the other. And you've got to do that. You don't give up. When things get tough, you have to see a goal, you have to see the horizon. And when you see that horizon, you just keep on going. And thank you to people like Monica who just kept on saying, well, I'll do whatever I have to do to keep this thing going. Okay, so our next director at large, and I just wanted to make a comment about the director at large position. Right now, it's basically a helper position, and people who are directors at large get involved with committees and work hard with our executive members to move forward the portfolios. It is our intention to change these director at large roles, not necessarily all of them, but as time goes on, to regional directors. We think it's very important for there to be people within regions, and there is really, I know with the Wild Rose Party, that I was the VP membership of the Wild Rose Party, and we had, I think, 8 or 9 regions, and those regional directors were really strategic to that party and to bringing members in, to keeping CAs working, to keeping members in those CAs happy and informed. And so we will do that again. We'll take a look at the map and we'll create regions. Vicky and I are working on that, and we'll go to these directors at large that are now working at large and put them into positions of regional director, where they'll be able to be outreach to the people in the communities, and they will speak to the board on behalf of their regions. So I'm going to start with one of our first guys, and Ty knows that he's going to be a regional director at some point. So please welcome Ty Northcott, Director at Large.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming out. For those that don't know me, I'm Ty Northcott from Bowden, Alberta. Everybody keeps talking about Rebel here today. I could give a lesson or two on Rebel. I'm a husband, a father, and a grandfather. Knew nothing about politics until probably May last year. Went to an event in Leduc and looking for a way forward for Alberta. And look at where I ended up today. What a great room of people. Everything that I've looked for in the last year to move us forward in politics and a better Alberta, this is where it led me, to this room right here. I followed the APP for the last year and been involved with several different groups. We did a meeting here 2 months ago and invited all the independent parties and organizations to it. It was with a group that I'm with called Full Steam Ahead. And look, we just kind of full circle, we're back to here. This was the only group that walked out of that meeting on that night that agreed to move forward with Alberta. So I think I chose. I don't really think there's a lot of choices in Alberta right now, but this is the choice for moving Alberta ahead. I've had the opportunity to look at all the different options out there, and I don't look at it through political eyes because I've never been involved with politics. And everybody says that, well, you are a politician. No, I'm a leader. Hell. So let's quit looking for politicians. Let's fill these boots that we need to fill with leaders. And we have a great group here. We have a great group here, and we have the right people to find the leaders that we need to make this a better province. Thank you.
Now, nobody can tell me that this man is not a leader and that he is not a great ambassador for the Independence Party. Ty is well known and well loved, and absolutely he's going to take care of the region that he ends up representing. So our next person on the agenda is, and I think Dan was brought to our movement through Catherine, and we're glad to have that happen too. See, Catherine is already on the move, bringing members in, and Dan is going to work as a director at large and eventually work with the region as well. Dan Duggan, can you please come and introduce yourself?
Well, thank you. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Dan Duggan. I live in Three Hills with my wife Dana and our son Zach, and I have two stepchildren as well, Brittany and Jesse, that are quite successfully on their own. So, yeah, but I have not always lived in Three Hills. 30 years ago, I moved here from Quebec. I was born and raised in Montreal, Quebec. So, if you know what it was like 30 years ago in Quebec, it was very much a separatist movement at that time. Okay, and so I was always Anglophone. I learned my French playing street hockey with the kids, and so on and so forth. So even then, I was a minority as an Anglican, as a Anglophone, and so I love this. Full circle comes around 30 years later, and I'm a minority again. But now I am a proud fringe minority with an unacceptable view. I've always been a proud Canadian. I've always been a Canadian, just like all of you. The difference is, what really got me, this is not the Canada I know. This is not the Canada I was born and raised in. And I get emotional about it because I look at what has transpired so quickly. So quickly. It wasn't long ago when I could say that as a Canadian, I could never imagine separating. I could never imagine a separate Canada or a divided Canada. I've seen what that looked like. Well, I lived in it. It wasn't pretty. But now, I reflected. And I began to realize, not only is this not the Canada that I know, we're not going back. I look at people, I've talked to people that have said, well, you know, what you're doing, you can possibly sit there and split the vote. Here's my answer. I'm the KISS system guy. Keep it simple, stupid. Okay? And this is the way I looked at it. And there's so many people that would identify with this. I used to listen to the Who music, okay? One of my favorite songs was We Won't Get Fooled Again. And in that song was a line I never forgot. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. We could have the NDP in here, but we're still under Justin Trudeau. We could have the PC party win. Who's the leader? It doesn't matter. We're still under Justin Trudeau. Our next election, for the first time in my memory, is not about a provincial election. It is a federal election. Because we will still be under the same Trudeau. So, democracy is a luxury, but it's also a responsibility. And in that responsibility is for us to stand up and defend democracy. And if we can't do it as part of this country, we will do it outside of this country. But it will be defended. Yes, it's an American saying. In the Gettysburg Address, Abraham Lincoln said in 1863, we the people, for the people, by the people. We can adopt that here. So what do I plan on contributing to this? What do I think it can bring to this? Well, one of the many hats I wear is I'm a pastor of a house church. So I found it interesting. You only gave me 2 minutes to try and get past the 2 minutes. That's not going to happen any more than keeping a lawyer to 2 minutes. So she couldn't do it, neither am I. So, like I said, keep it simple, stupid. Here we are, okay? We have a responsibility. And that responsibility is to not just look after the people, our neighbors, our fellow citizens now, but for the future. And we are not under a federal government that is guided by only a federal government. There is a larger agenda. And unless we get outside of that agenda, we will come under that agenda. And so all of our responsibilities is not to go out to the public and talk about, we want to separate. No, what our agenda is, we want to give people a choice. Just like Sharon and Vicky said, we have to have a choice. Quebec did not win their referendum. But even today, look how much they get. Because they have the hostage that they continually hold over Canada again and again. It's time for Alberta to have a choice. And if that means within Canada, under a new set of rules, conditions, understandings, fine, but I don't think that's gonna happen. So it's time that we take our bull by the horns and do it on our own. I just want to leave you with this one last quote from Edmund Burke that I know has been going around and around more times now than ever. He once said, "All it takes for evil to prevail is for good men, and in this case women, to do nothing. It's time to do something." And that's why I want to be part of this.
Thank you so much, Dan. And you know, over the next year, we're going to need all the Dan Duggans and people in this room to have town halls, to bring this kind of a message. We do, I mean, we're political people, and political people like to talk. We like to hear ourselves talk, and that's a good thing. Hear yourself talk. Take it out into the community. Take it out to your friends. Take it out to the dinner tables that you join in your neighborhood. Have town halls. Any chance you get to speak like Dan does, to take this message, do it every chance you get. People will never tire of hearing it. We see what's happening with the APP movement right now. Amazing, absolutely amazing. I have not been to one of their meetings. I went to Sherwood Park a few weeks back. I could not believe it. Hundreds of people eager to hear that message. At the end of it, what they said so often was, "What do I do now?" I'm a Toastmaster, and as a Toastmaster, we always say, every message must end with a call to action. That's the call to action we must take out there. Say, now that you know that Alberta, as Dan said, will never, ever be a happy partner in this country. Never, under any circumstance. Now that you know that, take the action. Join the Independence Party, become a candidate, move the message forward, talk about it all the time, hand out your cards, bring the message out over and over. Don't be nice, just be very, very gentle. People will accept it. Thank you so much, Dan. So I'd like to introduce another member of our past board, and a member she's going to continue on. So we're going to introduce Donna Oster Poetch. Now, Donna was a student of mine. I know, it's a dating process, isn't it? But I taught high school at Alston O'Brien in Edmonton, and Donna was one of my students. And afterwards we became friends, and she is just a marvelous person. She's willing to do anything she can to move this forward, and I'd like you to welcome Donna Oster. Tell us what you're going to do to move this party.
Well, first I want to thank Dan for stealing my speech. Really not. My name is Donna Oster Poetch. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I have 4 children, and I'm also a grandmother. Sharon, as she said, she was my teacher, and we're really good friends. Sharon was the one that actually, throughout all the years, has encouraged me to see past views and to push myself forward and to actually recollect on where we want to see Alberta and Canada to go. I'm also a small entrepreneur, and after being closed down the first time and losing a third of my clientele, the second time losing more, and then the third time thinking, something is extremely wrong here, and you know, now I need to be able to push myself forward and to do what Sharon said, is to recollect and think about what you're doing and to push yourself into a new direction. The only direction that I could see was the Independence Party. It's definitely my belief system. And it's my true hope that Alberta moves towards its own country and its true separation. Sharon said to me, this is going to be very short, okay? Because I'm just not a speaker, I'm sorry. But anyways, Sharon said to me, as she was talking to me and asking me if I would like to get involved. And she said to me, and just very simply, you know, Donna, she said, if not you, then who? And I think I'd like to put that out to everyone here. If not you, then who? It's for our children, our grandchildren, and for ourselves, of course. And I just want to say God bless to everybody, and thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Donna. Well done. Our last speaker today to introduce, Linda's going to come back on the board again, Linda Derosier. You know, Linda is one of those people that whenever you reach out and say, can somebody step forward and help me with this? She did it every time. A lot of times emails would go out and I would say, send the board an email and say, I need to have this done or that done. I'd like somebody to step forward and help me with this. And every time I could count on Linda to step forward to do that. That is just so essential. Just be a worker, be a helper, do whatever you can. And really applaud people like Linda Derosier, because she is the kind of person that will just never stop. She'll always help you whenever she can, and she'll make this work. Linda, come and tell us about your work on the board in the coming future.
So, my name is Linda Derosier. I was the CFO, and I'm stepping down now because I was just the interim one until we found somebody that really knows what they're doing. Thank you, Brandy. I am a 5th generation Albertan. My great-grandparents came here as homesteaders in the Sterling area. I now live in Sterling as well. And I have deep roots in southern Alberta. Up until 2 years ago, I really, I thought I did my duty. I worked every provincial, every federal election. My dad always said, you don't have a right to complain unless you vote. So I voted and I worked the elections, and I thought, gee, that's all I needed to do until 2 years ago. And then I started seeing things that were changing, and it scared me. I have grandchildren that I saw no future for them here in Alberta. And so I saw an ad on Facebook, an ad or whatever, and it was for the Alberta Independence Party. And the person I spoke to was Patrick Reilly. And after speaking to him, I said, yep, I'm joining up. And I'm so glad that I did, because I really feel like this is what we need to do. This is the solution to all the tyranny, all the nonsense that has gone on for 2 years. It doesn't matter who gets elected for the federal or provincial government the way it stands right now. The media will tell you the only 2 choices you have is UCP or NDP. Crap. No, that is not true. We need to make this independence movement known. We need to tell our friends, tell our neighbors, get out there and do something so that people will know they have another choice. And it's not about splitting the vote. It is about standing up for Alberta, for us, for our kids. I'm not a pastor and I'm not a lawyer, but I guess I better, not keep too long. But I did want to say that for me, I needed to stand up, be loud, and be counted. So I want y'all to stand up. Come on, stand up. I want you to be loud. Yay!
happen. Oh, that's so good to hear from Linda. You know, there are so many Lindas out there. Think about what she said. She's a mother, she's a daughter, she's got children and grandchildren. And these are the people, these are the kind of people, they all feel this way. We need to do something. We can't just keep standing back and letting this go on and on and on. And you know, I'm on social media quite a bit, especially on Twitter and Facebook, but on Twitter. And we think that it's just only conservatives that are interested in Alberta independence. It's not. There are a lot of people with progressive backgrounds and socialist kinds of backgrounds that really see that it doesn't matter at all where you stand in the political spectrum. Alberta, if you're an Albertan and you're going to live in this province and you're going to make your way and your family's going to make your way, it doesn't matter what your past political heritage is. You've got to change the situation, and you can't change it in this country. We are beaten every which way electorally. Will any province that gets to vote for you to send the money ever stop doing that? They will never stop doing that. So we people like Linda, she is the salt of what is in our coming into our party, and we need to know that. We can talk to everybody. There are the parents, the grandparents, the people out there that love Alberta. They're not going anywhere. Their kids aren't going anywhere. And so they need to make Alberta their important home. So let's give a round of applause for all of our incoming wonderful board. Thank you so much, everybody, for introducing yourself and keeping your speeches to 2 minutes. Thank you so much. So we're now going to move into our plenary sessions. And this was something I did when I was managing the membership in that with the Wild Rose. We used to have at every one of our AGMs plenary sessions. And these were times where people, and again, that's why I kind of really wanted people to mix up among others that they maybe don't know, where people could talk about policy. They could discuss their feelings about issues that they wanted to move forward with the party. So on the desk, if I'm correct, Vicky, what we did is we broke out some of our existing policies or the program of our party right now. We've written them down. We'd like you at your table to find a spokesperson, a note taker, and we'd like you to go through our existing policies on these issues. Talk about what it is about them that you like, that you find useful and you find that we can take forward. Talk about what you think could change. Talk about what you would like to see within those policy platforms. Take some notes, write it all down. At the end, we're going to maybe try to talk to a few people and get our spokespeople to stand up if we have some time to do that. But in the end, we're going to take all of those pieces of paper, all of those notes, and we're going to give them to our policy director, and we're going to be able to review policy. It is our hope at this point, Vicky and I've talked about it, that at some point during the summer, we're going to be very busy over the next year, but sometime during the summer, we may be able to have a special general meeting where it will be specifically on policy. So there's a lot of people in parties that really aren't that big on policy, but there are other people that are they can go into the minutiae, they understand policy, they want to have an effect upon it. So they would come to that kind of a meeting, and we would actually be able to reform our policy platforms before the next election, because we are going to have to go into that election with a platform, and that platform will be derived from the policies that we make over the next year, that we have now, and that we make over the next year. So if you could do that, if you all could do that, I would really appreciate it. We'll take a good deal of time to do that, and then at the end, we'll review what you've done. Okay? Thank you. Monica has something to say.
Keeping the board on time, we only have 40 minutes for this.
Okay, we'll see if we're on time. Okay, Monica. The CFO, you don't have to initiate our CAs. All of the CAs in the province are already registered. All you have to do is, if you have an interest that you'd like to help out in any way in your constituency, please leave me a piece of paper or whatever with your name and your phone number and which constituency you're in, please. And I'd love to talk to you. I want to be able to we're really having to move forward with that. So if you have any interest at all, just maybe you don't know what it's all about. Doesn't matter. We'll talk to you about it. We'll let you know, and we'll see if you can get involved in our constituency. That's a really big push for us in the near future. So if you can do that, if you can bring me a note, or even if you can just leave it on your table, but that'd be great, and we'll reach out to you. All right, so we move on to the next session, and I'm really very delighted to have our guest speaker here tonight. In 2007, after the 2017, after the breakup, the terrible breakup of the Wild Rose Party, and Marilyn Burns and I were great friends. She's a lawyer. She has a party called the Alberta Advantage Party. She says she's a separatist now. I said, took you long enough. But anyway, she and I worked very hard to prevent the merger of the two parties. And not because at any point were we ever was unity not important to us. Unity is always important in every movement. Nevertheless, it became clear immediately that it wasn't a unification. It was a takeover. A failed progressive conservative party was on the outs, and they wanted to take over. The up and coming, really a party on the move. Wild Rose was up and coming and on the move, and it was a takeover. Brian Jean, instead of consulting with the members, he decided to charge ahead with that. Unfortunately, that really left the Wild Rose out, and a rebirth of the progressives in the conservative movement, and that was really unfortunate. So after that merger happened, few of us moved on. Marilyn moved on. She wanted to have a rebirth of the Wild Rose. I said, Marilyn, that's history. Let's leave that behind. And I came back to the separatist movement. And so at that time, I had a meeting in Edmonton and called together some of the people I knew. And so we had 45 people in the room, great separatists. And I reached out to Michael Wagner. Early on, when I first came to the movement, I read, as I mentioned, I read his book, Separatism Then and Now, and I reached out to him then. He was always so easy to talk to. He just embraced, if you were a separatist, he embraced you, and he was willing to talk to you about anything. This is a gentle man who is an intellectual giant. We don't appreciate that. Michael is an independent researcher and writer, a columnist for the Western Standard now. He's written a book about the history of Alberta independence movement, and it's great going in there because you'll recognize names. I remember when I first recognized the name Valerie Clark. Valerie was one of the early, I knew Valerie, and her name was in there. And he has a recent book advocating for Alberta independence called No Other Option, Self-Determination for Alberta. And this is where we need to go now. We have to stop avoiding what it is we're doing. And as Vicky said in her speech, no more kind of being the nice guy. No more of this running away from the word independence, running away from the idea of separatism. If we do not believe strongly enough in what we are doing and we can't call it by its name, how can we convince others to know that it is the option for our future? And Michael never did, and this book, No Other Option, Self-Determination, is really a statement of that. Really, it's just a wonderful day-long, maybe 5-hour-long reading. Pick it up and read it. It'll mean so much to you. You'll enjoy it a lot, and it just really speaks to what we're doing. He and his wife, Ivy, and 11 children are committed separatists, and they have been educating the public on independence and separation for 25 years. Michael, is an honor to have you to come and speak to us today. Please help me welcome Dr. Michael Wagner.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for that very kind introduction. And it was really a pleasure for me when I heard from Monica that one of the founders of the Western Canada Concept was here. I wanted to meet him right after the board did their talking, because I was a member of the Western Canada Concept in the early 1980s. Like, that's actually why I've ended up writing these books. I was just a teenager back then, but in 1981 I joined WestFed, which was the first independence organization I knew of at the time, and I was just a teenager. Then the next year, Gordon Kessler won a by-election for the Western Canada Concept in the old Didsbury constituency, and that made a huge impact on the whole country, and I was just so excited about that party. So again, I was just a teenager, but I joined the party. I couldn't even vote, but it was a major part of my life at that time, and so to be able to meet a man here who was one of the founders of that party was really a great privilege. I don't know that he's in here right now. Is he in here?
He's in the hall.
Oh, okay.
He's in the
Good.
hall, yeah.
Anyway, that was very important to me, and I was just going to mention at the beginning, why did I write these books, or why did I get involved in this? And that's because as a teenager, when Pierre Trudeau was attacking Alberta with the National Energy Program, somehow it caused a reaction in me, and I just couldn't stand having Alberta under attack like that, and I had to get involved. Then many years later, when I was doing research on other issues, I saw that there was a lot of material on the history of the independence movement in different areas. And some of my friends said, why don't you write a book on it then? So I did, and I wanted to write a history of the separatist movement from the perspective of the separatist movement. Because if somebody else had written it, if some academic had written it, it would be like attacking the movement, it would be saying all kinds of negative things about it. But I wanted to write the true history from the perspective of those who were part of it, and that's what that book was all about. So that's why I wrote these books. So now I want to talk about why Alberta needs to get out of Canada. And Alberta does need to get out of Canada. And the best way to understand this is by looking at the history of the independence movement and looking at Alberta's history. For many years, there have been Albertans and Westerners who have been concerned about Alberta's situation within Canada. Like, it goes back generations, and if you can see the progression over time as people getting more and more concerned about what's happening to Alberta, and now we can realize, looking back at history, why now is the time to leave when we look at our history. Now, it's important to realize that the West has long felt unfairly treated within Canada. This part of Canada was originally Rupert's land, which was owned by the Hudson's Bay Company, and Canada purchased this land to annex it to Canada. But there were people living here, and they were not consulted. If you remember, like in what's now Manitoba, there was a Red River settlement with like thousands of people there. It was annexed. They were not consulted, and that contributed to the first real rebellion of 1870 because they were not consulted in being added to Canada. Then, of course, the West was settled by immigrants. The federal government brought in settlers to create an agricultural economy here, and the farmers here were at certain disadvantages. They had to buy their farming equipment from central Canada because there was a protective tariff. So that tariff basically forced them to buy their equipment from central Canada at higher prices than they would have to pay otherwise. Also, the farmers had to, when they sold their grain, they had to sell it through middlemen, so they got less of the total price for that reason, and they also had to pay the transportation costs. So the farmers were paying more for their equipment and getting less for the sale of their grain than they would otherwise. Now, they didn't just sit back and take it. I mean, the farmers got organized politically to fight back against these kind of things. During the 1920s, Alberta had a United Farmers of Alberta government, and also the federal party that was biggest in Alberta at that time was called the Progressive Party. I mean, progressive means something different now than it did then, but the farmers, they organized because they wanted to fight back, and they did fight back. And the biggest, probably the biggest example of the Albertans fighting back was in 1935 when Alberta elected a social credit government. Like, social credit was something very different from what was happening in other parts of the world, and this was international news when Alberta elected a social credit government. And Ted Byfield, who was the founder of Alberta Report magazine, this is what he wrote about Alberta electing a social credit government in 1935. This is what he wrote. While other provinces whined about the Depression, Alberta acted. We would not acquiesce in the misery we felt and saw around us. We would fight. We would rebel. If anything is characteristic of this province, it's that spirit of defiance. Push us far enough and we will strike back. That was our record, and that is our reputation. So Alberta did fight back against the Depression and against these other problems, but none of the Albertans were, not a significant number of them at that point began to consider independence. Albertans were angry about the position they were suffering within Canada, and they would take political action about that, but they didn't move towards independence. Now, that attitude all changed when Pierre Trudeau became Prime Minister. Because of Pierre Trudeau becoming Prime Minister, it's like a threshold was crossed, and that anger in the West towards Eastern Canada finally kind of boiled over to the point where people started to begin to talk about Alberta or the West becoming independent. Of course, when Trudeau got involved, when Pierre Trudeau became Prime Minister, one of his big priorities was to make Quebec feel at home within Canada. That was a top priority. So he brought in the Official Languages Act to make French more prevalent across Canada. And that was one of the first things that triggered some sentiment towards Alberta independence, because many Westerners and Albertans felt that French was being forced down their throats. The very first book on Western independence that was published in 1971. It was called The Unfinished Revolt, Some Views on Western Independence. So it was a collection of essays about Western independence, and most of them were against Western independence. They just talked about Canada becoming decentralized. But the editors of this book were John Barr and Owen Anderson. And the reason that's important is because John Barr was the executive assistant to Alberta's Minister of Education, and Owen Anderson was the executive assistant to Alberta's Premier, Harry Strong. So these were like influential people in the Social Credit Administration. It was only John Barr who really wrote anything in favor of independence, and even then it was kind of mild. But let me just quote basically his conclusion from his essay. This is what John Barr wrote in 1971. Conscientious Westerners must try to make Canada work, but in a more just fashion. If, however, it becomes obvious that Canada is not a viable proposition politically, or if the present injustice deepens, I see no very persuasive moral argument for the West trying to integrate itself into a burning building. Therefore, 1, we must strive for a more justly constituted Canada. 2, if Canada loses her political viability, the West must strike out against the odds to try and build an independent state in this corner of North America. Now, the reason I wanted to read this particular quote is because this is the origin of the idea, at least in published origin. First, let's try and make Canada work, and then if it doesn't work, we become independent. This is from more than 50 years ago. So I'm going to come back to this point, that for more than 50 years, people have been saying, well, let's try and make Canada work. So after 50 years, I say, isn't 50 years long enough?
More than
So that was before Pierre Trudeau really started making things bad. Things really went bad at the beginning of 1973. There was a war in the Middle East which caused the price of oil to skyrocket. Now was the time for Alberta to cash in because Alberta owned its natural resources and oil was our main natural resource. And Alberta was going to cash in, and we did cash in to some degree, but Trudeau was going to make sure it wasn't too much. So we did 2 things to make sure that the East would be the main benefit, or at least among the main beneficiaries of Alberta's oil. For one thing, he made sure that the oil sold by Alberta within Canada was sold at much less than the world price of oil. So when Alberta sold oil to Eastern Canada, we wouldn't get the full price. But we sold lots of oil to the United States. So what Trudeau also did was put an export tax on our oil exports. So whether we sold the oil within Canada or outside of Canada, the money would go to Eastern Canada. Alberta did get some money and became wealthier, but much of what we should have been getting was going to Eastern Canada, the federal government. So that made, of course, many Albertans angry. And of course, even Premier Peter Lougheed fought with Trudeau a lot during this time. Like Peter Lougheed knew this was unfair, many Albertans knew this was unfair, and he was fighting Trudeau during this time to try and get Alberta a better price for its oil within and without Canada. In 1979, there was a federal election, and Joe Clark was elected with a minority government with the Progressive Conservatives, and he was from Alberta. It was expected Alberta would get a better deal, but his government fell after just a few months, and there was another election campaign for February 1980. This February 1980 election campaign was unique because Pierre Trudeau decided to run against Alberta. Like, that was his main campaign. Historically in Canada, prime ministers would try and emphasize national unity. In any large country, you'll have different regions of the country that are their interests are different, and so the national leaders will try and smooth over those differences to enhance national unity. But Trudeau decided to campaign against Alberta and tell the East that he would put Alberta in its place. And one of the prominent Liberal campaign officials later would say that their unofficial motto was something like, "Screw the West, we'll take the rest." So they campaigned against Alberta, and Albertans did not appreciate that. We're very unhappy when Trudeau became Prime Minister again in 1980, after that brief time with Joe Clark. So it wasn't long after Pierre Trudeau became Prime Minister in 1980 again that he brought in the National Energy Program, which was to basically take control of Alberta's energy resources, to take control over what Alberta rightly owned for itself. This, of course, made many Albertans angry. And this also made a permanent change in Alberta's political culture, because before 1980, whenever there was a survey done on support for Alberta independence, the survey results were usually in a single digit, like 4 or 5 or 6% of people would support independence. After 1980, it's always double-digit support. The lowest ones I've seen were like 15 or 16%, but generally it's 20 or 25% or even higher. So that was a permanent change because of Pierre Trudeau. So that's why I call Pierre Trudeau the father of the Alberta separatist movement, because he's the one who created it. Now, if you want to talk about a fringe minority, people in Alberta who support Pierre Trudeau, that's a fringe minority. Yeah. Anyway, as a result of the National Energy Program, like I said, it led to a very strong upsurge in the separatist movement, and Gordon Kessler was elected in a by-election in 1982. He ended up losing that seat in the provincial election later on, which is too bad. But although there were people, like many Albertans, began to look towards independence, as I want to say, there were those who wanted to emphasize the point about, well, let's try and fix Canada first. And among these was Senator Ernest Manning. And Ernest Manning had been premier from 1943 to 1968, Alberta's longest serving premier. Then he became a senator. And as a senator, he co-wrote a book with a couple other prominent people, a political scientist and a former MLA, called Regional Representation, the Canadian Partnership. And what they were saying was, Alberta and the West needs to be represented in national institutions or else it will separate. And by the main institution they were talking about was the Senate. Let me just read a quote here from this book by Ernest Manning and these other men. The choice is not whether Canada shall have or not have strong regional loyalties. History has already made that choice for us. Rather, the choice is whether such forces shall be channeled and accommodated by providing them with an effective focus within the institutions of national government, or whether our national institutional arrangements will largely ignore federalism, leave provincial governments as the only credible focus for regional concerns, and flirt with the possibility of the extreme manifestation of frustrated regionalism, separatism. In other words, if the national institutions of Canada are not reformed, we will have Western separatism or more of it. So again, they're appealing, this is 1981, they're appealing again, let's reform Canada, let's change the national institutions in order to make Alberta fit within Canada, or else it's going to be out. So we had that in 1971 with John Barr, and then here again 10 years later with Ernest Manning. We're talking about influential people. Like, these are not fringe people who everybody ignores. These are influential people who are saying we need to reform Canada. In 1984, Pierre Trudeau resigned. John Turner became Prime Minister. Then Brian Mulroney won the national election campaign later that year in 1984. And Albertans relaxed. Like, Albertans have been voting progressive conservative on a federal level for many years. And every MP in the Mulroney, from Alberta was a PC, and then the Mulroney's government then. So Albertans figured, here was our chance. Finally, we're going to get a fair deal. But as things turn out in Canada, it's the system that's the problem and not necessarily the party. So even though all of Alberta's MPs were now in the government, Mulroney also had many MPs from Ontario and Quebec, especially from Quebec. So he was going to also cater to central Canada, just like Pierre Trudeau had done. So after coming to power, one of the things that Mulroney's government had to deal with was Canada had recently purchased CF-18 fighter jets, and those fighter jets needed to be maintained. So there was a competition between a company in Montreal and a company in Winnipeg, which of these companies would be best to maintain the CF-18 fighters. And based on the government criteria, the Winnipeg company won the contract. It wasn't even that close. So the Mulroney government awarded the contract to Montreal, even though Winnipeg had won. Of course, that made many Westerners and even Albertans very upset, because this showed that we thought we were voting for a government that was going to be fair to the West, and it's being unfair to the West. It's in favor of Quebec. And one of the youngest member of Brian Mulroney's cabinet at that time who made that decision was a man named Jean Charest, who's currently running for leader of the Conservative Party. So, I mean, it's true that the Conservative Party is better for Alberta than the Liberals, but they still face the same pressure that they have to cater to the East, even if they wanted to do something good for us. You know, someone like Pierre Poilievre, he looks pretty good, and he talks pretty good, but he's still under the same pressure that he would still have to cater to the East if he wants to. And the very best we could hope for from him is to give us a brief reprieve. Like, if he became Prime Minister, he'd give us a reprieve maybe, but then when he'd be gone again, we'd be back in the same situation. So there's no way that that's a permanent solution. You know, electing one man who might be good for us for a little while, it just delays the ultimate problem that we're gonna have to deal with. Okay, back to Brian Mulroney then. The things that Brian Mulroney did, especially with the CF-18 contract, led to the creation of the Reform Party. Like, many Westerners were very, very angry. And the separatist movement began to revive. But Preston Manning came along with the idea. He figured that, again, that we could, let's reform Canada. Let's make it better for Alberta. And he was actually, it was part of his conscious plan to bring in the separatists into his movement. Saying, well, let's take that energy, and rather than pull Alberta out of Confederation, let's put that same energy into bringing Alberta and the West into Canada. So the Reform Party's motto was, of course, the West wants in. We're going to bring the West into Canada. And I brought with me here, this is a photocopy of a pamphlet from 1987 from the Reform Association of Canada. Like, the Reform Party, first it was the Reform Association, and then the Reform Association became the party. I just wanted to read a brief thing from this, just to make it, to illustrate a point. So this is from 35 years ago. This is what they wrote. Throughout our history, Ontario and Quebec have held the lion's share of political influence in Canada, and they continue to dominate the national scene at the expense of the West. Our political and economic development is being hamstrung by the vested interests of the Golden Triangle establishment in Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal. The massive $65 billion raid on the Alberta economy perpetrated by the Trudeau Liberals through their national energy program is a good example of how Western economic development has been frustrated. More recently, the Mulroney government's award of the $1.4 billion CF-18 aircraft maintenance contract to Canadair of Montreal, despite a significantly lower bid to the technologically superior Bristol Aerospace of Winnipeg, has shown how politically entrenched this Eastern bias is. So this is 35 years ago. Like, does that sound any different from what we're facing today? So again, here we have proposal. Let's make Canada better. Let's make Canada work for the West. And after all these years, it hasn't. So a year after that pamphlet came out, there was a progressive Conservative member of Parliament from Edmonton who wrote a book called Uneasy Patriots, Western Canadians and Confederation. So this was 1988. Now, David Kilgour understood the West. He was from the West, and this is actually quite a good book, Uneasy Patriots, explaining why the West is unhappy within Canada. And this is one of the things he concludes. The time has come to address a long-standing injustice and bring the West into equal partnership with all other regions of the country. Political, economic, and cultural equality is the means of ending Western alienation. So in 1988, he said the time had come to end the long-standing injustice. In 1988, that's 34 years ago, and that long-standing injustice has not been dealt with. I mean, at the time, it looked like maybe it would be, because that was right when the Reform Party was taking off, and the Reform Party, of course, was very popular in Alberta, and so it looked like, well, maybe we will get this justice. It sort of looked like the time had come to deal with these issues. I mean, the Reform Party, one of their major programs, one of the major proposals, was the creation of a Triple E Senate. That's a Senate that would be elected, effective, and for equal representation from each province. So that would give the opportunity for Alberta to have equal representation, with the eastern provinces. So that, again, the Reform Party won most of the seats in Alberta in the 1993 and 1997 elections, but then over time it became more focused on getting national power instead of representing the West. And so it transformed itself into the Canadian Alliance in 2000, and then it joined with the Progressive Conservative Party of Canada in 2003 to form the Conservative Party of Canada. But the first Conservative Party of Canada Prime Minister was Stephen Harper, the first leader of the party. And he was from Alberta, he was from Calgary. He had been one of the original Reform Party organizers. So many Albertans were willing to trust Stephen Harper to do what's best for Alberta because he'd been part of that Western Alberta movement. Nevertheless, of course, in 2015, there was a federal election and Justin Trudeau was elected. Of course, he's got that name that so many of us don't like. So he was behind the black ball right from the beginning, but he soon began to take specific action to thwart Alberta's economic development. I think someone mentioned earlier Bill C-69, the Impact Assessment Act, which many people call the No More Pipelines Bill, because the purpose of that bill is to prevent any more approvals for Alberta's pipelines, the pipelines that we need to transport our oil for export. Then he also brought in Bill C-48, the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act, which many people call the Alberta Tanker Ban, because the whole purpose of it was to prevent the export of Alberta oil off of the BC's coast. So basically, as a result of Trudeau's policies, Alberta is losing control of its natural resources. The Constitution guarantees to each province the ownership and control of its natural resources, and Trudeau, through his policies, is doing indirectly what the Constitution prevents him from doing directly. Of course, Trudeau brought in the carbon tax, and that was challenged by the Alberta government at the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Trudeau's carbon tax, instead of defending the provincial jurisdiction over natural resources. And one of the judges who, the ruling on that was a 6-3 decision, of course, in favor of Trudeau, but so there was 3 dissenting judges, and one of them wrote that by deciding in favor of Trudeau, the Supreme Court was opening the door to federal intrusion into all areas of provincial jurisdiction. Because if the federal government can intrude into natural resources, why can't it intrude into other areas of the Constitution? So this is a very threatening decision that circumvented the constitutional guarantee of provincial control of resources. Now, at the same time as Trudeau and his government is trying to thwart our oil industry, they're still benefiting and reaping billions of dollars every year from our oil industry. So they're trying to shut us down and take our money at the same time. And that's just a situation that makes so many Albertans understandably angry. And there's an economist at the University of Calgary named Robert Manzella. He's been tracking these kinds of things for decades. And he was the one who calculated that from 1965 to 2018, Alberta was made a net contribution of $630 billion to Eastern Canada. $630 over that time. And you think about how much economic development we would have in this province if that money had remained here, and now it's gone for good. But there is good news, and the good news is the provincial separation is constitutional is allowed under Canada's constitutional law. This is because, Quebec had, referendums on independence in 1980 and 1995. The 1980 referendum failed drastically. The 1995 one just barely missed, just by 1 percentage point. So the Canadian government sent a reference case to the Supreme Court, asking the Supreme Court if under Canada's constitutional law, Quebec could unilaterally declare independence. The Supreme Court said no, Quebec cannot unilaterally declare independence, but if it holds a referendum with a clear question and a clear majority of people vote in favor of independence, then the federal government is obligated to negotiate Quebec's independence. So this is the first time that there's been a clear statement in constitutional law, Canadian constitutional law, about independence. If a province has a referendum on independence with a clear question and a clear majority vote in favor of independence, then the federal government is obligated to negotiate the independence of that province. So this is Canada's constitutional law, and it's very different from many other countries because, in 2017, the Catalonia region of Spain tried to separate from Spain, and the independence leaders were arrested, and there was demonstrations. It held a successful referendum, but the independence leaders were jailed. But that's very different. The Spanish Constitution does not allow the regions of Spain to leave, but Canada's constitutional law does allow a province to vote for independence and have that as negotiated independence. Now, because of that decision, the federal government passed what's called the Clarity Act, which is supposed to kind of flesh out the details of how that would take place. And there are many academics, especially in Quebec, who think the Clarity Act is more stringent than the Supreme Court decision allows. So if the federal government tried to use the details of the Clarity Act to prevent a province from separating, say Alberta in this case, the bottom line is that the constitutional law allows the province to separate if there was a clear majority on a clear question. And that's more important than any of the details of the Clarity Act. So just to conclude then, I want to say independence is the only solution. I looked at different people throughout history with John Barr in 1971 and Ernest Manning in 1981 and people like David Kilgour in 1988. All these people over a period of 50 years saying we need to improve Alberta's position in Canada. Maybe we can reform Canada rather than Alberta getting out, and none of that has worked. The best case, of course, or the strongest case for that was made by Preston Manning and the Reform Party. We sent those MPs to Ottawa to make things better for Alberta, and what they found was that the system cannot be fixed. This is the message of the Reform Party. Canada cannot be fixed. If Preston Manning and the Reform Party could not get a Triple Senate and could not otherwise reform Canada's political system, then it can't be done. The West has tried to fix Canada, but it doesn't want to be fixed. Therefore, the only remaining alternative is to get out. If we keep asking Central Canada for a better deal for Alberta, they'll just keep laughing at us. They've got all the power, they can laugh at us all they want. But if we hold a referendum and we vote for independence, they won't be laughing at us anymore. We have Jason Kenney taking the federal government to court over the carbon tax, and he loses. We have Jason Kenney holding a referendum on equalization, and where did that get us? Nothing. We've tried everything. We've tried everything. There's nothing more to try. People say, let's keep trying to make things work. No, we did try. People have been talking about this for 50 years. It's time to leave. So Alberta needs to rekindle that spirit of defiance that Ted Byfield talked about and become an independent country. Thank you.
It never fails to amaze me how the prosecution of the argument for Alberta independence is so huge, so wide, so broad. There is virtually almost, I don't know of anything, I don't know, maybe some of you could supply for me the argument against it. There's just long lines, lists and lists of reasons why Alberta should not be a part of this country. And yet we still seem to, as Michael says, 50 years later, 65 years later, we keep on making these arguments. And we keep on beating up on ourselves about why changes aren't happening. We know we can't possibly convince ourselves anymore that any change is ever going to happen. If you live in any relationship in your life and you keep on taking it over and over and over, you keep on accepting the inequities, you keep on accepting the problems,
for you to think that anything is going to change 65 years later is utterly naive. So Albertans, we must move forward. We must become independent. There isn't an option for us. So there is no other option. There is no option. Well, thank you so much, and I really do appreciate Michael for coming out all this way and giving us this wonderful speech. And please, again, do take a look at his books, and I really do recommend that you spend $1 on them and read them, because they're something you should keep in your library for your future. I'm inviting Vicky Bayford up to the lectern again to make an important announcement to our party. Please welcome Vicky.
Thank you. So normally at an AGM, we would do a leadership review. We decided this year that we are not going to do that, because I've just decided that I think in the best interest of the party, and because of the growth that we're having right now, because of all the amazing people that have stepped forward, that I know that there's a really good person out there that can do this job much better than me. I know where my strengths are, and I think that I've done a good job up to this point, and I'm proud of myself for what we've accomplished in the last few months. But I really want to bring forward those true leaders in Alberta, and I want them to step forward and run in another leadership race this year. And so I can go back and possibly maybe run a portfolio, help people start CAs, whatever the party needs me for, I'm going to be there for. So anyway, I'll make this short. So yes, I'm going to be stepping down. I will stay the leader of the party until a new leader is elected. We will be holding the election on September, what did we say, 10th?
September 10th. Yeah.
September 10th. So there are some leadership, yes, I'll let Sharon actually review what the process looks like, and if you think you are that person that can be the face of the party and deliver the message that we need to deliver to Albertans, I encourage you to step forward. Anyway, thank you.
When Vicky told me that she had made this decision, I said to her, Vicky, if people encouraged you, would you run again? She's never answered that for me, but do understand that if you were motivated to have Vicky to be the leader of this party, you could ask her to run again, and you could perhaps persuade her to do so. In the meantime, this has been a very important move, and Vicky and I talked about this a lot. She and I have worked very hard. We want you to understand that we have never been an exclusionary party. Certainly the work she and I, we've gone to numerous meetings over and over to talk about unification with other parties. And specifically, of course, with the Wild Rose Independence Party. And we really met with just sort of stonewall, nothing, whatever. And all we've ever said to amalgamate, to merge these parties, is that all we want is to elect a new board, to have a leadership contest, and to have definitely that the principle of the party is to hold a referendum on independence within the first year of forming government. Those are three simple requests. It's not hard to say, to embrace them if you're truly an independence party. But it hasn't been embraced up till now. We're determined that maybe we'll convince that unification. But in the meantime, that's what we're going to do. We're going to move forward with a leadership contest. I'm just going to give you a bit of Cole's notes on the contest so that, that it will be posted on our website, so you'll have all the, long list of rules, etc. But just so you know ahead of time, there will be a $4,300 entry fee, and you can recognize that number as being the maximum you can contribute to a political party in Alberta. These funds must be paid before the entry approval into the contest. Donors, including contestants, can claim donation receipts. We purposely made it this way, so that really it makes it fairly easy for you to put together $4,300. Many of us in the party try to do that anyway because we need to raise funds. And so if you want to run for leader of the party, certainly a contribution of $4,300 with a donor receipt if you put it all together yourself. Your donors, like let's say that you have friends that will help you out. You haven't got the $4,300, but they'll help you out. They can get donor receipts. So, you know, if your friend Joe gives you $400, Joe can get a $400 donor receipt. So again, what you do is you can raise the funds, but they have to be paid into the party before you can enter the contest. There will be a $500 compliance fee. Now, what a compliance fee is there's rules. There's rules to conduct yourself, conduct rules within a leader contest race. And so in order to keep people on the straight and narrow, we have a $500 compliance fee. If there's complaints and there's problems that are being created that break the rules, then we can draw from that $500 in terms of fines, etc. That amount must be paid only by the candidate. Contestants must have sold a minimum of 50 memberships during the campaign to qualify to be placed on the ballot. That's not a big stretch. All memberships sold during the campaign must be turned into the party within 24 hours of sale. And the reason for that is because every candidate, every contestant will have access to every other member that have bought a membership. In other words, you may sell a membership to a friend of yours for your candidate, but the other candidates can reach out to that member too and, you know, try to promote themselves. So we need to have those memberships into the party so that we can allow everybody access to them. If you're on the board at the time of the contest, or you must, and you want to run for leadership, you must give 3 weeks notice. You must be off the board for 3 weeks prior to becoming a contestant. Members of the board may not publicly or privately endorse a candidate, may not fundraise for them, may not sell memberships for them, or while endorsing them. In other words, you may not be on the TIP board, the TIP board, and working on a contestant campaign. The party can, and clearly the reason for that is because we don't want any influence within the management of the party, whatever. Everybody wants to come into this contest on a level playing field. The party communications officer will send out all campaign literature promotions of the candidate. So if you're a candidate, then all you have to do is say, here, I have a promotional blurb I want you to send out, and the communications officer with the party will send it out on your behalf. So everything will come through the party. And nobody will have access to our membership list. The contest will be run and managed by the membership director with Bob, with a team that he will compile. It just basically says who is to be on it, or others that would work to run the leadership contest. The contest will be conducted in a fair and unbiased manner at all times. Complaint decisions may be appealed only once, and all decisions of the team will be final. The leadership contest will begin on June 1st, 2022, and end on August 31st, 2022. Contestant applications may be submitted as early as May 15th and as late as August 15th, 2022. The leadership convention and the vote will be on September 10th, 2022. So if you know anybody that wants to be the leader of this party that would be a good candidate to be the leader, please encourage them now to get on board and to compete in our leader contest. So if you want to, I know we're kind of tired, it's been a long day, if you want to, our incoming board is at the front, and Vicky and I are here. If anybody, we can certainly open up to questions off the floor if you'd like to for a little while. Whenever we're done and exhausted with that, we'll close the meeting, and please eat some of these goodies at the side table and drink some coffee and whatever. We don't want to take them home. And visit and enjoy, and for the next couple hours, next hour or so, and then we'll move on. And thank you again so much for coming. It's just been wonderful having you here and being able to lead this meeting. Thanks.
Question, you can stand up at your table or you can come to the mic and ask a question if you like. Speak a little louder.
Has there been any dialogue between your party and the PPC party?
The CPC?
Federal PPC.
The People's Party. No, it wouldn't be a natural sort of conversation for us to have. We're a provincial party, and we're concerned only with the provincial election. I know a lot of us have affiliations or feelings about what's happening in the federal thing, but let's just remind ourselves that it really doesn't matter what happens in Ottawa. It doesn't matter at all to us what happens in Ottawa. Ultimately, this is all about provincial politics and whatever. And so no, we haven't. Sure.
I just want to make a comment. I recently started reading the book Democracy in Canada, and in that book it clearly states that MacDonald and the English government didn't care about the West when he was specifically brought into Canada to support Central Canada. It's there. It's MacDonald talked about it. So we haven't had a chance since the inception of Canada.
Oh, absolutely.
And that was an eye-opener for me, a really big eye-opener.
Oh yeah, there's absolute, sorry, thanks. Thanks, Dana. There's absolute quotations of that. There was no question about it. Lord Acton and there was, the central part of Canada, the prairies were going to be exploited because for the use of Eastern Canada. I want to say, my great-grandfather was a United Empire Loyalist. My family, my Scottish family, MacLeese, came from the United States into Eastern Canada. And in fact, my grandfather worked for the federal government and was moved out to the west to open, he was a well-educated man. He opened these educational institutes in Saskatchewan, etc. And there was absolutely no doubt about it. There was British Columbia and there was the East. There was Upper and Lower Canada and British Columbia. And they were going to join these two British colonies, right? And we were in between. They could see that there was a lot of resources, a lot of wonderful resources in this area. It was a wild and, untamed area, but they were going to tame it because they were going to exploit it. And they've done that. They've done that consistently and forever. And because of the fact that Alberta, because we were rich, you see, we were our own worst enemy in many ways, weren't we? We got fat during the 80s, and we got fat, and we just kept saying, oh, everything's wonderful, because aren't we proud? Because the average Alberta income is $75,000 a year, and those poor suckers in Ontario, they are only getting $70,000, and we thought this was a wonderful thing all the time, that we were just being further and further driven into a position where we had no control over anything. I mean, so bad now that Justin Trudeau doesn't even make any bones about it. And Michael talked about that shocking Supreme Court decision on the carbon tax. Resources have been one thing we always believed we were in control of, didn't we? We always thought, look, we have our resources and our province controls that. We do not control anything. We live in a country where our courts, ladies and gentlemen, you always thought you could depend on the courts, right? If you had this wild tyrannical dictatorship of a Trudeau and they would do this and call it a War Measures Act and they would do these various things, well, the courts would protect you. The courts are protecting nobody. Our Canadian courts are totally corrupted by politics. And let's face it, we don't have protection of anything anymore. Certainly not our Constitution. And ladies and gentlemen, certainly not the worthless piece of paper called the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Right. Well, if everybody's satisfied with everything, we're glad to you guys just take your time and enjoy each other. And we'll be back here probably in a few months. In the meantime, really look forward to this leadership contest.
There's one more question.
Seeing how tyrannical Trudeau is and how he's changing the way Canada is working, his NDP coalition, which nobody voted for. What is stopping him from changing our constitution? So we can't do this in 2020.
He did he not touch?
What is stopping him? Because we know, and I don't know if everybody knows this in this room, the War Measures Act is invoked. It has not been revoked. It is
Okay, I do want to speak to this whole Clarity Act and constitutional thing that Michael talked about.
That's my concern. What could he do to stop us?
Okay, I will tell you what could happen, and what, I'm going to be honest, I'm an optimist, but I'm a realist optimist, if there is such a thing. And I realistically do believe that if we have a referendum on independence, and we have a clear question and a clear answer that nobody can argue with, you know, clear question, clear answer, you can ballyhoo all you want, but that's a clear decision that the Alberta people want to move out of Canada. Then what happens, as Michael talked about, what happens is Alberta then applies to the federal government for a secession agreement. You say, okay, we've had our referendum, Albertans clearly want out, so we're applying to the federal government for a secession agreement. This is not something that happens overnight. The federal government says, oh yeah, well, we've got to think about that. You owe us a whole bunch of money for the what? Canada Pension Plan? Right? How much more have we put into the Canada? Anyway, it goes on from there. You have to pay for the military, you have to do this, you have to do that. So then you start negotiating that. And more so than I think them trying to, because I don't think the federal government even cares anymore about the Constitution or the Charter. They don't even care. They know that the courts will support anything they do. They know that the courts will thwart us at every angle. So I think more than that, they will just keep putting barriers up and barriers up. And I do believe, and you can ask Michael about this too, I do believe that if in fact, and remember, we live in an international community that has really come to our defense with the truckers' convoy, hasn't it? Yeah. It has leaped to our defense. And Michael talked about Catalonia. Yes, unfortunately, Catalonia has been trying to separate from Spain for a long time. They can't. It's clearly stated in their constitution that there will be, that anyone who tries to break up the country is an insurrectionist, subject to jail and perhaps even hanging, as they used to do, right? That's not so in Canada, and the whole world will be watching this process that we will initiate. And I do believe that when the world sees, forget about the UN because they won't back us, and the globalists won't back us, but when individual countries, United States, European countries see that we are virtually being barricaded from doing what we legally, if we go through the steps and we show Canada and we show the world our goodwill as a province to say, look, we're only doing what the law allows us to do. Our people have spoken, and now the federal government has an obligation to sit down at the table and talk with us. If they don't do it, then I say we can unilaterally declare independence. Now that's an awful thing to think about, because you have to maybe take up arms to do it. But at that point, I think the world would be behind us. That's just my personal opinion.
Okay. Didn't Trudeau change the Constitution? He wrote the book when he first got into power, because I'm pretty sure about that. At the very beginning.
In order to open the Constitution, you need the approval of 7 provinces.
Well, then what did he do? Because
The Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
oh, was that the one that he rewrote?
Charter of Rights and
Oh,
things that Trudeau's
oh, because I was all confused. I know Notley was pretty happy because in the book it said that there was no more adult departments for just adults, and she was just really into that. So it really became more socialist, this book.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, again, I remind you, please, if you want to help us out with CAs, that would really be a great thing for you to put foot forward with, and do reach out to us. We're going to have I'm going to quickly, if I can, call a brief board meeting here. Right now, it's just a few of us, just to announce when we're going to have our next board meeting, okay? And then we'll carry on. I think you're going to see news in the future. We have, I mean, the wonderful Alberta Prosperity Project is just, they're just wonderful. And, you know, they can't come out and they can't support us directly and openly. But I will tell you, if you ask the people in that group, you know, what is it that you think we should do? They will tell you that you need to be a part of a party that is clearly headed for independence, clearly headed. And without saying so, that really is our party. So, you know, go out, go to their events, whatever, but just get involved because we've only got a year. We've got a year, think about it, you guys. May of 2023, and we have an election. And we gotta be on the ballot, and we gotta be counted, so. Okay? So you guys,